Welcome to Policy Precision, where we give you an unbiased dive into executive orders. I'm Ethan Caldwell. And I'm Nora Harper. Ethan's going to break down the mechanics and all connected to the human side. Today, we're decoding Executive Order 14202, which is officially titled Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias. So, here's how we're going to break this down for you. First, we'll look at what this new order on faith actually is. Then, we'll dig into its stated purpose and the specific grievances it mentions. From there, we'll introduce the task force it sets up and what its mission is. And finally, we'll pull it all together with the key takeaways. Okay, first things first. Section 1, a new order on faith. Let's get right down to the basics. What is this document we're actually talking about? All right, before we dive into this specific order, let's just do a super quick refresher to make sure we're all on the same page. An executive order, well, it's basically a signed, written directive from the president. It's not a new law, but it tells the federal government how to operate. It's a really powerful tool for a president to shape policy. So the one we're focusing on today is Executive Order 1422. The title is Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias, and it was signed on February 6th, 2025. I mean, that title alone, it tells you right away that this has a very, very specific focus. All right, on to Section 2, the stated purpose and policy. So you're probably asking, why was this order even created? Well, every executive order has to lay out its official rationale. This is the part where the administration basically makes its case for why this is so necessary. And if you pull a quote directly from Section 1 of the order, you get to the absolute core of it. The mission is, and I'm quoting here, to protect the religious freedoms of Americans and end the anti-Christian weaponization of government. Wow. I mean, that is a really direct and, you could say, powerfully worded statement of purpose. Now, this order doesn't just come out of nowhere. It actually anchors itself in existing laws. Big ones like the First Amendment, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, even Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. It's positioning itself as an enforcer of protections that are already on the books. So that's the legal framework. And now, Nora's going to take us through the human stories that the order uses to justify its existence. Thanks, Ethan. Okay, so Ethan just laid out the legal side of things, the what. But this order, it's also very much about telling a human story. It points to very specific incidents in people to make the case for why this action is, from its perspective, so urgently needed. This is the why. So one of the first things the document brings up is federal charges that were filed against people it describes as peaceful pro-life Christians for praying and demonstrating. We're talking about incidents where people faced prosecution for their activities right outside of abortion facilities. And to really bring this home, to make it personal, the order doesn't just talk in generalities. It lists specific examples of the people who are prosecuted. We're talking about a Catholic priest, a 75-year-old grandmother, even an 87-year-old woman and a father of 11. You can see how these examples are really meant to put a human face on what the order sees as the problem. Then the document pivots. It's not just about what it calls unjust prosecutions. It also alleges that the previous administration's Department of Justice largely ignored over 100 attacks on Catholic churches and pro-life centers. So it's making a two-part argument here, prosecuting one group too much and protecting another not enough. And this next one is interesting. The order also brings up a pretty controversial FBI memo from 2023. Now, this memo suggested that some radical traditionalist Catholics could be potential domestic terrorism threats. What's key here is that the FBI retracted that memo, but the fact that the executive order still includes it, well, that's a deliberate choice. It's meant to argue that there's a pattern of bias, even at the highest levels of government. And finally, to really drive home the scale of the problem, the order throws out a big number. It claims there was an 8-fold increase in acts of hostility against churches just between 2018 and 2023. An 8-fold increase. Using a statistic like that, it's clearly designed to frame this as a growing national crisis. So that's the problem as the order lays it out. Now, let's go back to Ethan to see what the order actually does about it. Thanks, Nora. So we've covered the why, the justification. Now let's get into the mechanics, the how. The primary action this order takes is to create a brand new government body. And here it is. It establishes something called the Task Force to Eradicate Anti-Christian Bias. It's going to be housed right inside the Department of Justice. The best way to think about it is like a focused government-wide audit, but it's looking for one very specific thing: anti-Christian bias.
And when you look at who's on this task force, you realize just how significant its scope is meant to be. I mean, the chair is the attorney general, and the members, it's a real who's who of cabinet secretaries, state, defense, education, plus the director of the FBI and the heads of 12 other agencies. When you put that kind of high-level leadership on a task force, you're giving it some serious authority.
Okay, so we know who's on it, but what is this high-powered group actually going to do? Well, the order gets very specific about its mission. Essentially, its mission has 5 core functions. Step 1, they're going to review past agency policies, comb through them looking for bias. Step 2, if they find something, they're supposed to recommend that it be revoked. Step 3, they're going to solicit input from the public and faith groups, so open the doors for feedback. Step 4, identify any deficiencies in existing laws and how they're enforced. And finally, step 5, they bundle it all up and recommend new actions directly to the president. It's really a full cycle. They investigate, they consult, and they recommend.
And this isn't an open-ended project either. The task force is on a pretty strict timeline. They have to get an initial report to the president in just 120 days. A more comprehensive report is due in 1 year. And then, after 2 years, the task force is set to terminate. It's done, unless the president decides to extend it. So you can see this is all about focused, time-bound action. Okay, with that, let's bring Nora back in to wrap things up for us. Thanks, Ethan. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, haven't we? We've talked about the legal stuff, the human stories, and the operational details of this new task force. So for our last section, let's just pull back for a second and look at the big picture. What are the key takeaways here?
So if we're looking at this from my perspective, focusing on the mechanics, it's pretty clear. This order establishes a cabinet-level task force to investigate perceived bias. It's mandated to review, recommend, and report its findings straight to the president, and it's all on a defined 2-year timeline. It really is a classic top-down audit of government policy.
Right. And if we look at it from the big picture, the human perspective, this is really about aiming to provide federal protection for one specific faith group. It uses those very specific human stories and grievances that we talked about as its main justification. And doing that, well, it naturally raises these much broader questions about what the government's role should be when it comes to religious matters.
So, when you boil it all down, this executive order is a very direct response to what it sees as real grievances, and it creates a pretty powerful new tool to address them. But, it also leaves us, and you, with a really critical question to think about. When a government creates a body specifically to protect one group, what questions does that raise about equality, fairness, and freedom for all? That's definitely something to consider. Thanks so much for joining us.